Hello, my name is Eric Palmer, and this is my final research proposal. The topic I have chosen is the circular economy, specifically through the lens of the development and recycling of satellites and, by proxy, other orbital debris. The formal research question I have chosen is, what is a useful framework for measuring and implementing international policies that help to facilitate sustainable design, implementation, and decommission of satellites in Earth's orbit? Satellites have been in regular use for a relatively short period of time, yet during this period, the amount of new debris we have thrown into our own orbit has resulted in a great deal of hazards that make launching newer objects into space more and more difficult. This project would aim to distinguish the existing difficulties surrounding the prevention of such waste buildup, while also influencing an effort to make use of decommissioned satellites and debris in the development of new satellites. The primary method that will be used to conduct research for this project will be interviews with existing companies that produce and launch satellites, since these companies have the most knowledge in terms of the cost and the requirements for designing systems that could recycle satellites and other debris. The interview questions would mostly consist of open-ended questions about design requirements that would need to be met in order to have recyclable satellites and the infrastructure that would need to be in place in order to actually recycle satellites and debris. The method of analysis of this information will primarily be inductive, as the information gathered from these interviews will be used to distinguish the issues surrounding the difficulties with designing recyclable satellites and the infrastructure needed to recycle them. The primary goal of this research project is to define what exactly is required to implement satellites into a circular economy, so this information can be used to design policy to help for satellite production to become more sustainable and have less of an impact on Earth's environment, as well as decreasing the amount of space debris in local orbit. As a result, there are three primary outcomes that are to be expected by the end of this project. The first is a definition of sustainability in terms of orbital debris. For example, is it possible to recycle existing debris, or is our only sustainable option designing future satellites specifically for a recycling process? The second is that once we have the potential to sustainably produce and recycle satellites, how do we enforce or fund these efforts? Will there be international governments involved in the enforcing of these practices? If it is necessary to have orbital recycling systems, will it be the burden of the producer to provide the necessary infrastructure to recycle satellites? And the third is, given what currently exists in terms of infrastructure and technology, what is currently possible for companies to do to help improve sustainability in terms of orbital satellites? Finally, the individuals who should be provided this information are first and foremost policymakers, so as to help ensure that systems will be put in place to ensure the regulation of future development for orbital technologies. The second group that should be provided this information are the companies involved in the production and launching of satellites, so that they can be aware of the potential mechanisms that could be put in place in the near future. And the third group that should receive this information should be the general public, as public opinion can be a massive influence for change, and as a democracy, we should include public opinion as a primary decider for what we do as a whole. Because of this wide range of audiences, it is important that the findings of this project be published in a research paper written in clear enough language that it can be spread and communicated effectively without dumbing down the language.